This is the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Hello and welcome to Chewing the Cud podcast. My name's Andrew Jones and with me today is
Sarah Bolt.
How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm good, thank you, Andrew. How are you today?
A little bit tired, if I'm honest.
Why?
As was one of our guests who you're just about to listen to.
Go on, tell the listeners why.
Well, I've got to give a shout out, to be honest with you. I was at the Cream Awards last night, and I know, one of our guests was as well. And so I've got to say a big shout out to Laylee Atlantic, who invited me along and paid for my dinner and room for the night. So thank you very much to them. But yeah, no, really good, really interesting. The Cream Awards. I mean, I also should shout out some of our previous guests and soon-to-be guests. Paul Morris from Oxytec was there, and Oxytec won an award. Rachel Hayton, who we've already had on, but will be on again shortly. Her and James Yetman were there for the cow recovery, and they won an award. And Synergy Vets in total won an award. Who else? Dillington. So locally, Dillington won an award as well. I forget which it was, sustainability, because I think was it Stowell Farms locally were the commended. So runner up on that one, I think it was. Don't quote me, please. But yeah, no, interesting and lovely to see some people locally doing well and winning some awards.
Fantastic, but a little tired.
Yeah. Just I think it's about 4 hours sleep. Well past my bedtime, and then to be honest with you, I woke up my usual sort of time of sort of 5:30. So I just got up and got on. But it was interesting. By the time I left, I think most people were still in bed, to be honest with you. But I'd rather got home and get on. But thinking of awards, I guess it's congratulations to yourself. I mean, I see, was it a finalist for is it Southwest Farmer Inspirational Women in Dairy?
Women in Agriculture, yeah. So, yes, really, I don't know what to say, actually. I'm really excited that I've been, nominated and that I have made it to the finals. So we're not going to know until November. So I'm not, got a long time to be excited to find out the results.
Well, that's probably the worst bit about it, isn't it? Is by the time you get there, it's But yes, no, congratulations for being a finalist. It's a good achievement and well worth yourself, because you're definitely an inspiration to lots of people in this industry. I know that for sure. So yeah, really, let's talk about today's podcast. As you listen to this, we're coming to the end of GB Calf Week. And our guests, first time with 3, so it didn't go quite as chaotically as I was expecting, given we're all remotely, and there's a little bit more talking over each other when it's remote.
Yes, 3 inspirational women.
Yes, definitely. You could say I was very well outnumbered on this particular podcast. So we've had GB Calf Week. We are talking about the GB Calf strategy for the next 5 years. And I think it's a really interesting conversation, the way the industry, we talk about the history to start with, how it's progressed from where it started, where it is now, and where it's looking to go over the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, sort of talking about that strategy going forward and how they want to engage the industry.
Yeah.
To take, to drive it all forward.
And it's all for the betterment of the whole, as an industry as a whole, not just the beef industry, but dairy industry as well, or beef and dairy industry. Obviously, a lot of that is the dairy beef. But yeah, so let's go listen and hear us discuss the GB calf strategy. This podcast has been brought to you today by Chewing the Cud Limited, who offer completely independent dairy and beef nutrition, cow signals advice and training, along with ROMS mobility scoring. For more details on these and other services available, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on nutrition@chewingthecud.com. Chewing the Cud Limited now offers first aid training from a registered first aid at work trainer and experienced minor injuries practitioner. For more details, please visit our website www.chewingthecud.com or email us directly on training@chewingthecud.com. Hello, I'm Andrew Jones.
And I'm Sarah Bolt.
And welcome to the Chewing the Cud podcast, a podcast for the UK dairy industry.
Farmer, advisor, processor, and everyone else. We have topics and episodes that will interest you.
We discuss the practical and the technical aspects of different UK dairy industry topics.
We aim to make you think about what you're doing and ask yourself, can it be done differently?
Listen to us speak with specialists from inside and outside the industry about their area of expertise.
Subscribe and listen to episodes for free on your favourite podcast platform.
Sign up to our website, www.chewingthecud.com, for podcast notifications so you never miss an episode.
And links to our socials, including Instagram, Chewing the Cud Podcast. All one word, and remember, no G.
Or email us direct on podcast@chewingthecud.com.
If you like what we do, please share and leave us a review to show your support. And that's it. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome back to Chewing the Cud podcast. This week we're going to talk about GB calf strategy. As this podcast comes out, it will be the end of GB calf week. But we're here today with three guests to talk about the GB calf strategy for the next, I believe it's 5 years. So with us, I'll start with is Sarah Tomlinson, who we've obviously had on before talking about TB, which was incredibly well received. She is lead veterinary science expert for AHDB. We also have Laura Awdry, who is senior knowledge exchange manager dairy for AHDB, but also has done her Nuffields in sustainable dairy beef production, which I'm sure will add to the conversation. And also Harriet Bunning, who is lead animal genetics expert beef, again with AHDB. So welcome to you all.
Morning. Thank you for having us.
Well, fingers crossed. I just wonder if this will be chaos with us all remotely, but I'm sure it will be fine. I've never had three guests with us before, and obviously, like usual, Sarah's on the podcast there, hiding away in the corner,
lurking in the background.
That's good. So, like usual, if we start, I know you've been on before, Sarah, but do you just want to give us a little bit of brief about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I started off as very much as a vet in practice, in farm practice. That led to probably quite an unhealthy interest in bovine TB, as you all heard about on a previous podcast. And I joined AHDB nearly 18 months ago now, primarily because I wanted to remind myself that I do know about more than just TB. Hence, one of the first projects I've been involved in is getting the next phase of the GB calf strategy off the ground, because it is such an important topic.
So, Laura, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to be where you are today? Because obviously you're not from these part of the worlds originally.
Yes, as you can tell, I do have a slight Antipodean twang. Not fresh off the boat, though. I came over from New Zealand, it would have been 2008 now, so a very long time ago. My background, pre-AHDB, I have been in farming and calf rearing, so sort of started off as a contract calf rearer. And outside of AHDB, my husband and I both farm a partnership down here in Cornwall, where we also run a calf rearing business, working directly with dairy farmers. But for the last 3.5 years, I've been working at AHDB Dairy. So I obviously cover the counties of Devon and Cornwall, working directly with dairy farmers, sort of managing discussion groups. And as you also alluded to, have just finished my Nuffield farming scholarship, which was looking into sustainable dairy beef production. And I guess being a beef farmer myself, but also working in the dairy sector, it's quite a passion of mine, I suppose. And you can have a foot in both camps and hopefully, understand and represent the sort of the needs and the wants from the dairy sector, but as you're actually a beef farmer as well, you understand how that translates into real life.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, having a foot in both camps. I know myself, I've been to some beef meetings in the past, and the beef guys brought up things I'd never even thought about as a dairy farmer at all. And you just think, oh, it's a calf, it's fine, but it's completely different. But anyway, moving on. Harriet, would you like to tell us a little about yourself and where you are today?
Yeah, thanks. So I guess I start with I love cows. But my background is really in science. So although my family have a small herd of beef suckler cows down in the southwest, I actually went to study biology and genetics at university. Did a PhD up at the University of Edinburgh in breeding cattle for smallholders in sub-Saharan Africa. So did that for a few years and got to travel a bit, which was very nice. But realised that actually the world of academia and science is all a bit much, and joined AHDB a couple of years ago and really enjoy these days working in that gap between scientists and farmers, actually making sure that the research that's done is useful for real people on real farms. So I look after and manage all of our beef genetics work at AHDB, particularly our national beef evaluations. And it's interesting for me because I don't know so much about the dairy industry, but I do know that actually the breeding decisions that dairy farmers are making these days has a huge impact on our beef, because so much of our beef now originates from the dairy herd. So yeah, been really interesting to be more involved in the GB calf strategy.
Yeah, no, it will be interesting. I'm just thinking as we were saying this, I mean, this kind of ties back a little bit to the run we started talking about breeding calves, feeding calves, et cetera, when we spoke to Helen and Stuart Rogers back in July, it would have been. And the fact that they're using genomics to only breed, was it something like the top 20, the youngsters, or top 20%, and everything else then was going to beef. And so that really ties in, I think, with some of the stuff you're saying, Harriet. But I mean, really, I guess, who wants to start? Who wants to tell us a little bit about what the GB calf strategy has been in the past, what it's going to in future, where's it going, basically, or yeah, give us a bit of background about it.
Shall I start?
Yeah, go on, Sarah. Everyone's being a bit hesitant.
So it goes right back to sort of 2006. So when live calf exports were banned.
Yep.
So there was this dairy bull calf cohort that had no trade, basically. So RSPCA, Compassion in World Farming, brought together this calf export forum. And they said, we need a solution to this. So that then resulted in sort of lots of discussion, I suppose, but no tangible outcomes, I suppose. There was a report published in 2013, which was called The Modern Solution to the Exports of Calves, working in black and white. So very focused on dairy bull calves. And again, there was a lot of people talking about it, but it all came to a head around 2018, where there was public sort of expose, I guess, if you like, where there was a headline in The Guardian, Dairy's Dirty Secret, and we were called out for routine euthanasia of these dairy bull calves.
Yeah.
So that was when AHDB, NFU and industry got together and started to own that and actually said, what can we do about it? And that was where the original GB calf strategy, and it was called the dairy bull calf strategy at the time, came about. And we have seen really significant shifts in actually changing in behaviour. And you mentioned the use of sexed dairy semen, and that has been actually fundamental to reducing the number of dairy bull calves that are born and increasing the amount of dairy of beef semen that are now going into the dairy herds.
I think we're one of the highest users, aren't we, of sex semen across the world?
Exactly. When I work with kind of international collaborators, we're talking about like genetics and dairy beef. We're experiencing something ahead of the rest of the world just because our British farmers have been so good at taking up sex semen.
I do see a few headlines these days from like the US and that when I'm on social media, sort of starting to push that dairy beef thing that, as you say, we seem to have already taken that leap forward with, and I maybe I hadn't realized myself that we are that far ahead maybe of some of the other countries in terms of doing this, other than maybe some of the prep I've done for this. But that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think within the Holstein breed now, we're sort of up to 88% usage of sex semen. And as you said, Andrew, when you're traveling, especially I've gotten to do that over the last sort of 12, 18 months, when you come out with those figures, other dairy producing nations are quite shocked. And I think one thing that's probably worth identifying too is I think the UK has been incredibly good the adoption of, I guess, technology, things like wearable sensors. So heat detection has become incredibly advanced. And I think that's given farmers probably also more confidence in the product. So that was definitely something that I took away from my travels comparing to other countries too.
And I guess that shows a real success of those sort of earlier years of that calf strategy. I guess we stopped Sarah mid-tracks on the history. So I guess it's let's pass back to Sarah and continue that journey.
So, in AHDB, NFU brought industry together. What are our key goals and aspirations? And, the vision was, as it is still now, rear all calves with care. And I suppose one tangible goal was to eliminate that routine euthanasia of dairy bull calves on farm.
Well, there's certainly one milk contract now doesn't allow you, does it? You've got to keep them on farm till, I can't remember what period of time it is, but you have to. There's no chance of you doing that as part of your milk contract.
Yeah, and some of the red tractor standards now encourage. Well, that was fundamental to the use of sex semen, was encouraging responsible breeding. So having a written breeding and management policy in place, and that the natural step was to then use sex dairy semen, so you weren't getting the dairy bull calves. Then working groups came together, and close to my own heart, one of the biggest barriers to getting those calves those beef calves off dairy farms is bovine TB. So one of the other really great outcomes of the previous strategy was actually a TB subgroup, which the NFU led, which brought together in a really small number APHA, DEFRA, integrated supply chains, farmers, vets, into a room to say, right, what are the barriers and what could the solutions be? And we've actually seen some really clear changes in TB policy to help support improved welfare at a farm level, rearing calves with care, because we've made it easier to get calves off farm and into isolation units and AFUs, for example. And I think that's been massive to get government policy changed through all of industry working together.
I mean, I don't want to get stuck on TB, but I think what I was going to say is related to this. I mean, I got involved with a conversation with someone on LinkedIn, a sustainability manager for somewhere, milk supply, and he was going, people are still rearing too many dairy heifers. So you could flip side to say, well, if they produce less dairy heifers, you'd have more beef, which ties into what we're doing there. But again, as I said to him, the problem is TB. People rear more dairy heifers than maybe they need because they're always afraid that there's going to be that sudden shutdown, or they've lost 10 animals they're not expecting and they need those replacements coming through. So TB has a big effect on what we're talking about today, just in terms of, well, we could probably have more beef animals if we didn't have the TB issue that we currently do. And if I tie this back to other ones like we've done with Butalar in the past and the integrated systems, they ultimately said what matters to them is they need a dairy farmer, because without the dairy farmer, there isn't the dairy beef. And without the dairy beef, there is not the whole integrated system, the industry that has sprung up around the integrated beef, whether it's Game Changer or Butalar or whoever it happens to be.
Absolutely. And one of the key focuses for the next phase is still TB, and how do we improve on what we've already achieved and carrying on that working group, because you're right. The farm's ability to be financially and environmentally sustainable is impacted by TB, whether that's calf rearing, how many heifers you put to sex semen. Yeah,
definitely. So we've talked about the past. What's the future then? We're talking about the next 5 years, is it 2025 to 2030?
Yes. We decided that it was originally going to be 3 years, but we thought actually within 3 years you can set some things in place, but you don't necessarily see change or measurable change. And so some of the things that we're talking about are very much continuing what was started in the previous 3 years, like how do we integrate the supply chain to ensure that farmers are rewarded for making those beef semen decisions at that level. We had some really key stakeholders in the room. We did some bigger industry workshops. So when I first joined AHDB, one of my first outings was to, there were over 80 farmers, vets, supply chain, everybody in the room talking about, right, what is important for the next phase. And absolutely the sustainability goals and the financial reward were key things, as well as still protecting and being able to promote the reputation of the dairy industry through good calf welfare. So we came up with right calf, you've got to get the genetics right. Right start, we've still got to be better at calf rearing. And right route, which is that whole TB supply chain, getting information from the processors right back down to that beginning decision, so we can start to reward people for some of those decisions.
So those three things you've just mentioned about, is it right calf, right start, what was the third?
Right route.
Right route, sorry. They are now being referred to as the three pillars of the strategy, is that correct?
Yes.
So I feel like Sarah would like one of the other two to contribute here.
I think Harriet, being the genetics expert, is definitely going to cover. I think the right calf. That is definitely her.
Well,
her
I mean, as you're there, Laura, we've touched on it briefly. You're Nuffield. How do we compare to other countries then when it comes to the dairy beef? I know we touched on it briefly, but you've obviously travelled the world for your Nuffield. What are you seeing in other parts of the world?
But it's really interesting. We have to realise that we're quite different than a lot of dairy producing nations in sort of the rest of the world. The UK's kind of makeup, I suppose. We've only just got over 7,000 dairy farmers left in the UK now. Huge amounts of consolidation. So we are losing, sadly, some of those family farms, and we are seeing larger herds and larger units. And in terms of that calving pattern split too, that's also quite unique, I guess. We've got probably around 35% of what we would call all year round calving herds. These are, farms that calve 12 months of the year, produce a calf. We've then got probably about 45% of the industry, which I guess what we would call them maybe an undefined pattern. They might be all year round, but they might take a break maybe over the summer, to fit around lifestyle or busy periods. And then we've also got a proportion which are block calving, which is probably only about 20% of the industry. And when we think of those other really large dairy producing nations, you've got New Zealand. It's pretty much 95% spring calving, 5% autumn, very much the same as Ireland. And then when you look at big powerhouses like America, they're pretty much all year round calving because you need to produce milk all the time. So each country has very different challenges. Those spring calving nations, you're getting all your calves at one time of the year. You've got a huge seasonal sort of amount of milk, huge seasonal amount of calves. Therefore, you're kind of just front loading any non-replacement calf issue at one time of the year. So I think in our context in the UK, we probably do have a little bit of an advantage by the fact that we do have a real diverse sort of calving pattern, but with that also then comes the challenges because it is, we do still see a peak in the spring. And actually really interestingly, what we're seeing now is autumn calving is actually becoming more popular. So, I think autumn calving's probably increased by about 2.5% over the last year. So, when we might have seen a lot of calves being born at one time of the year, we're now seeing a shift, and that's going into that sort of October, November period. And it's just things like that. How does that play out, and how does that affect then sort of the rest of the industry in the UK? So, as I mentioned earlier, with sex semen, we're definitely leading the way. I think America's just over 50%. I think for me, when I was over in Ireland, Chuggas have obviously got their own Dairy Beef 500 program, sort of helping to aim dairy farmers and align the beef industry. But I think their figures were quite low still, around sort of that 20% uptake. And again, with sort of New Zealand, massive, they've got 4.9 million dairy cows and they have about 1.8 million bobby calves a year. There's a huge kind of mountain for them to climb, I think, in terms of dealing with that non-replacement calf issue. So our situation in the UK is unique. We all share the same challenges as dairy producing nations, but I think we probably all have slightly different tools in the toolbox as well.
I was going to say, I probably first came across the idea of sort of dairy beef in the way maybe we do now, actually, when I was in Victoria, because we used to get Wagyus. It was Wagyu semen, they supplied it, was it $5 a straw or whatever it was, and then they'd guarantee they'd take them at, was it a week or whatever age it was, into that system, but it was only in what was the traditional calving period. And for us, given that we were more split calving or more all year round split calving than the traditional, which you say gave us advantages in some ways and disadvantages in others. So I can relate there to what you're saying. But it's just interesting. You say we sometimes, what's the word, live in the box we do, and we forget about the bigger picture in terms of what's going on outside in the bigger world. We only think what we're doing. So it's interesting to hear from your experiences of traveling. But as you dropped Harriet in it, I mean, you said right calf. It's your turn now, Harriet. So what for right calf, what are you defining as the right calf? What are you looking for, and what are we hoping to bring over the next 5 years on that front?
I think right calf is really all about producing calves that have a purpose. And if they have that purpose, then they're going to be treated well. They've got a value, and we won't see the kind of welfare issues that we know are a potential risk to the reputation of the industry. So right calf, we formed like a working group as part of the pillar, brought together representatives from across the industry, really. So we had dairy farmers, we had calf rearers and finishers in the room, but we also had representatives from the breeding companies, from some of the beef breed societies, and then also processors, so milk processors and beef processors in the room as well. And really, it was kind of talking about the problems at the moment around genetics, and then kind of trying to come up with some of the solutions, and really not putting all of those solutions on the back of the dairy farmers, seeing what we could do together as an industry.
When you say problems, what do you define as problems for the genetics at the moment?
I think there were a few things that were brought up. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is if it's the dairy farmer making the breeding decision, calving ease is always going to be number one.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could ever try and argue with a dairy farmer that calving ease shouldn't be number one, because really that cow is the most important thing.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Victoria, when I chose my beef bull, it just had to calve, because you usually put them on the poor performing cows anyway. So you wanted them to get up and go as quickly as possible. So you just want them to calve, drop the calf, and get up and go, basically, not have any potential problems which knocked her even worse, and then potentially that was the end of her, sort of thing. So completely agree with that comment.
And I guess the uncomfortable truth is that the very easiest way to ensure an easy calving bull is to choose a small beef bull. And those smaller beef bulls are going to produce calves, the beef traits they're passing on to their calves, make calves that aren't as fit for purpose in the beef industry. That's the kind of the quick, easy way. And so that way, if we just did that, we'd be producing dairy beef calves that aren't really fit for purpose for the beef industry. And that means that we're more likely to get those welfare problems.
So you're looking for, I suppose, really to get some, I know there already is calving ease data, but probably some better calving ease data. Would that be right for the beef that then gives you the growth rates afterwards? I mean, I'm just using an example off the top of my head again. Back in Victoria, at least 3 times now. Sorry to everyone listening. I mean, I used a bull, I expect we were remembering a bull called Oman, and usually under the US system, anything under 8% was a calving ease on the Holstein, and it was very rare to get anything under 8. He was 3%. And I remember all of those calves calving 2 weeks early. And then, but by the time you got to the point where they were like a month, they were up with everything else, because they just grew in that first month. They just grew, and you wouldn't have known there was a difference. So really, that's what you're kind of looking for the beef, isn't it? It's something that calves easy, but then gets the good growth rates going forward.
Yeah, I think data is key, really. And we know that if we collect data, we do genetic evaluations, we can find those animals that buck the trend, that maybe have the better beef characteristics, that have good growth rates, like you were saying, but also calve easily. And so really it's saying, okay, dairy farmers, calving is your number one priority. We need to supply you the data to find those bulls that are going to give you that calving ease you need, but also produce a calf that's fit for purpose for the beef industry.
So pulling back in from, we said up talking about Helen and Stuart, genomics again, can genomics play a role in this as well to give us this information?
Exactly. And I think genomics is really helpful for identifying those bulls. But the other thing that was brought up a lot in our discussions with our working group was this idea that the dairy farmer needs to be rewarded for producing a good beef calf. I think in a lot of cases at the moment, really, calves are just, is it by an Angus sire? And that's good enough kind of thing. But we know that there's a lot of variation within breed. So you can have one Angus dairy beef calf who's really good and another one who's less good. But I mean, they might be even be by the same kind of Angus sire. Half the genetics comes from the cows as well. So I think what would be really interesting, and we are seeing this in other countries, is this idea of a national genomic testing program where I guess the perfect scenario I'm picturing is you tag your dairy beef calf, that tag sample gets sent off for genomic testing, and you get back a piece of paper that measures the beef genetic potential. Obviously, there's lots of other things that come in as well. That calf needs to have got colostrum.
It's BVD in that, isn't it, is the one for the thing. So like a BVD tag, effectively, take a DNA sample as you're doing it and send it away and get a result.
Exactly. And then that piece of paper could maybe help mean that dairy farmers that have made better beef breeding decisions could be rewarded for it, and that calf could be more valuable.
So picking up on that, Harriet, you're saying some of those decisions that dairy farmers could be taking. So not just picking calving ease, what things could they be looking for in those genetics to sort of deliver what the beef industry requires?
So I guess there's not a kind of simple answer, but there are places that we could go at the moment to get that information. The breeding companies in the semen catalogues will often provide some quite good information for some of their beef sires. They are collecting data. I mean, some of them will even tell you about the feed efficiency potential of some of those calves. That's obviously a key one that determines profitability of rearing and finishing. But also just, growth rates. And then we already at the moment produce the national beef evaluations. So you can look up sires of these beef calves on the AHDB website through the national beef evaluations to get some results about days to slaughter, carcass weight, even Europe grade, which will all determine how much that calf you get paid for that calf when it's actually slaughtered.
And I think that's really key that you said that, Harriet, because we've, as rare as ourselves, you can have Anguses and they can all kind of come from a catalogue and you can look at something, but then actually when you take that sire data and put it into, say, the Breed Society, the EBV value, that will actually come up with slightly different results than potentially what you might see in that genetic catalogue. So I think sometimes, dairy farmers I think you've talked a lot about calving ease, but another really big one I think is actually gestation length.
Yeah, I was just thinking that one actually as well, because I know a lot of guys that when they're towards the end, if they're in a block, they'll look at gestation length, won't they, rather than calving ease. If it calves a week earlier or something, great, because that pulls that cow forward that little bit early. She's got a better chance of getting in calf next time round, etc., etc.
Yeah, so a lot of farmers will be looking at those really short gestation bulls, 274 days or something like that, and they don't necessarily, quite often in the industry, a more beefier animal might have a much longer gestation length. So I think it's going forward, being able to choose, what do they call them in New Zealand? Curve benders, I think it was. It was being able to find those bulls that, there's a really famous Charolais over there called Jerry. They have a dairy beef progeny testing. So they actually go through and test all these dairy beef progeny to use on the dairy farm. And, by looking at him, he had all the characteristics of a beef animal, but somehow he was able to sort of manage that short gestation and that easy calving and produce those carcass qualities. So it's sort of, it's a very difficult task, isn't it, Harriet, to sort of find what you need for that dairy farmer, but also tick all those boxes for the beef industry too.
Well, I was going to say that was one of the comments I said I'd been to a beef group and picked it up. It was, I'm not trying to knock any particular system, but these beef guys went, we don't want anything out of the spring calving herds, basically, because we don't want that jersey in it. We don't want those little ones. They don't give us the carcass that we're looking for at the end, basically, which is kind of what we're saying. And I say, I'm not trying to knock spring calving here at all, but it was the feedback I got from some beef guys one time, is that they're not giving us the animals we want, basically.
I think that's interesting. I actually did one of the things that came out of our discussions was this potential issue of small stature dairy cows. And because of the amount of data we have in the national beef evaluations, I could actually go in and maybe challenge some of these ideas. So we have an awful lot of carcass data in the national beef evaluations. I think it's about 14 million animals we have basically kill sheet data for now. And that includes dairy beef calves, but it also includes an awful lot of cull cows. So I actually could match up dairy cull cow carcass records and carcass records of their dairy beef offspring.
Yep.
And so I looked at that and I went, okay, if we say anything, if we assume a killing out percentage of 50% for cull cows, which is just a number out of thin air, but it's a good enough number, and we look at animals that we expect their live weight to have been under 450 kilograms, and we say, okay, those are our small stature dairy cows. Are those small stature dairy cows more likely to have had progeny that don't hit spec? So say 280 kilogram dead weight. And they were more likely to than suckler beef or larger dairy cows. But still, I think it was over 90% of their calves that we had in the database did hit that 280. So yes, I think the outcome of that was that small stature dairy cows are maybe more likely to have calves that are less good for the beef system, but they're still very capable of having calves that are good for the beef system. I think 90% sounds plenty good enough to me.
I was going to say, I think we've all seen some really lovely sort of Jersey blue crosses that, with great rumps on them and all sorts, haven't we? So, there's obviously quite a few that would fit into that 90% category that we can even just think of.
Well, I was going to say, hopefully that's why we're here, is to challenge maybe some of these preconceptions that people have. And that was certainly one of the feedbacks then was there. And obviously you're saying, Harriet, that you can show that that's not always the case. Well, it's more than not always the case. It's 90% is the case that they're fit for purpose. So let's be honest, even from a normal, as you say, you can still get plenty of animals that aren't fit for purpose. So, okay, how does that compare to other larger dairy cattle? And if you're talking about the smaller cattle, what are their sort of percentages wise if you look at those sorts of information?
I have a feeling that was around the 92%. So it was significantly different, but in the scheme of things, it was not a huge difference.
No, exactly. So any more you want to add about the right calf, Harriet, or anybody else as part of this discussion on the right calf? It's just finding the right animal for your purpose, basically.
Yeah, so there are a few different things that we as a group think that the industry could do to help support this, really. So there's a few things. We talked at the beginning about sex semen, and that we have these breeding plan templates that farmers can use. And a lot of the focus has been on sex semen, and we think that's really important. But there's that kind of added aspect of don't just go and everything else will go to a beef sire. Be a bit more conscious about which beef sire, maybe not just use whatever straws the semen salesman happens to have in their tank. That, and then also, I think supporting this idea of allowing name sires on passports. I think that's probably the step before genomic testing. We'd really like to get to genomic testing for dairy beef calves, but just having those name sires on passports means that we get so much better data through, so that we can then do better genetic evaluations and provide better data back to the dairy farmers.
Thinking back to the genomic testing, there's obviously a cost to that. Who's paying for it?
Great question. And I think there's an awful lot of discussion that we'd need to put in place beforehand to work that out. But we, AHDB, already use Levy to fund the national beef evaluation. So it would definitely be something we'd consider with our boards. Okay,
because I say otherwise, you say, like you said earlier, the outcome doesn't want to be that all puts all the emphasis back on the dairy farmer to be supplying the right calf, and that yet they're the ones that have got to tick all the boxes to then supply it through.
I don't know. I think there's definitely going to be a mindset shift though too, Andrew. I think dairy farmers have to realise they're actually beef farmers as well now. And when we look at the amount of prime beef, this is prime beef 12 months to 30 months, that is actually, pure dairy cross beef. That was 37% last year. So, including also purebred sort of bulls and maybe some heifers that go in there. I think it was about 40. I'd like to say 43 from memory, but that's a substantial amount of beef that comes from the dairy herd. So in terms of the fact that they are also paying a levy into, that beef animal then goes into the beef industry, is it like a mindset shift of, they do have to also start to realise that it's not a byproduct, that calf, it is a co-product, and it is going into the beef sector. And it's that kind of mindset shift in behaviour and thought process.
No, that's a fair comment. It comes back to, again, the integrated beef supply chain. They want dairy farmers, and they want the dairy farmers to be supplying them those beef cross calves, isn't it, basically? So you're right. might not be their focus, they're dairy farmers, but it is a co-product, byproduct, however you want to describe, of what they're, no, you don't like byproduct, co-product.
Definitely not.
of what they are doing, because there is that market that they are pushing forward to with it. So yeah, and that's a fair comment, definitely.
Can I just come in here? So the other thing that I think we keep talking about integrated schemes, and there are some great integrated schemes out there, but I think something that came up definitely in some of our discussions, and I know also in some of the right route discussions, is that it's supporting even those calves that aren't through integrated schemes. I know there's some really great examples of individual dairy farms and beef farms working together and not going through any of those kind of big official integrated schemes, but effectively running their own little one. And that works really well because of the kind of communication.
Exactly. They're picking between them the sires. So it ticks the box for the dairy farm and it ticks the box for the beef rearer afterwards as well. So as you say, there are plenty of people doing that as well, definitely.
Yeah.
So that was the first pillar. I forget, sorry, what the second
right
pillar.
Calf.
Right.
And then right start.
Right start. Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you're still listening, Sarah. So the right start, and we could just talk all sorts of things here. I mean, we could talk about colostrum, we could talk about milk powder. I mean, obviously we've done podcast on them and the immunogy and various different bits and pieces. But from your point, and it's all related to the right start, but from the strategy's point of view, what do you consider to be or what is considered to be the right start?
Well, you mentioned a lot, didn't you there, Andrew, sort of the colostrum, the feeding, but I think, all that information exists out there. And I think the right start pillar was more aimed at kind of getting a really concise message. It was aiming that all calves sort of under 12 weeks of age, there was sort of standard best practice throughout the industry. There's a lot of information out there for farmers, from different representation, from feed companies, from vets, from research. And there's probably like a lack of, I guess, maybe standard operating procedures on farm as well. So the right calf group was really aimed at kind of, it sounds silly, but professionalizing calf rearing, making it a really important role on the farm. It's not just that thing that you go out and you've just, I've got to go feed those calves or something out on the farm. It's actually giving value to that job as something that's really important to the supply chain. So that was kind of, I think, the basis behind what the right start was aiming to do.
And for, I suppose you could argue for every calf to have the right start, because again, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but sometimes you do see the dairy heifers maybe have that little bit better TLC than the beef calves. I'll be honest, I've been guilty of that in the past. So, I know we're not here for Calves Anonymous, but I'm going to say I have been guilty of that in the past. But, so really it's making sure every calf has that right start, because even, again, we go back to stuff we've already covered before. 50% of their growth is in that first month, 6 weeks? I can't remember what it is now off the top of my head. And, again, that's when their organ development is. That's when that's when they're more like the best feed conversion. That's when you get the growth going first to start with. Every calf needs the right start, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think in some of the working groups I was involved in, there's an awful lot of information out there. Volumes of milk you feed your calf, abrupt weaning, staggered weaning. There isn't a best practice we could say that everybody follows. It's what's the best practice for your individual business and what you can do and commit to. And so we talked about actually pooling all of that information for advisors, farmers, anybody involved in calf health, to pull out evidence-based best practice to be able to produce that standard operating procedure on that farm. And you're right, having been a vet in practice, we used to have different protocols for beef calves and dairy calves, and actually we shouldn't. The other thing that I think we talked about was about identifying areas where we don't know and where are the evidence gaps to ensure we are getting good research coming through, innovation and technology to make the ability to deliver best practice through data recording, calf health, temperature monitoring, things like that. There's so much information out there. How can we collate that and make sure that farmers, advisors have access to it and have confidence in that information? So it was about knowledge exchange, research, data, evidence, but translating that into tangible actions on farm.
But you're right in terms of, I remember it's, again, social media. Was it the first Young Stock conference? Wasn't that been, 2 years ago, was it? And I remember somebody going and they showed their scribbles on the first speaker had said, you want to, hit 8 litres plus of milk. And then the second speaker went, well, you only want to hit like 4 and get solids into them as quickly as possible. And they come as, well, what am I supposed to do when I've got different companies giving me different pieces of information? How that is not helping as a industry when farmers, advisors, whoever, are getting conflicting, confusing information when it wants to be, as you say, evidence-based, able to back up and say, no, this is what we need. We want a clear message to everybody to ensure we're hitting the right protocols.
Yeah,
exactly. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because whilst there's such a range of milk powders out there, whether they're skim-based, whey-based, what percentage proteins, what percentage fats they are, that will dictate as to what that weaning looks like, what that feed intakes looks like. And until we get a better understanding of milk powder labels and can understand what we're actually looking at, and therefore what that powder is going to deliver for that calf, and therefore what else the other protocols need to be, I think that's one of those big areas that knowledge exchange is really, really required.
We see this too from, AHDB's point of view. We've just had GB Calf Week, and, we put on 4 meetings, focusing on calf rearing and calf health, and they were incredibly well attended. And any previous sort of KE events that we've done that have been really farmer facing, sort of weaning management and stuff like that, they are generally the most popular events that we have. There's a huge wealth of knowledge out there that farmers really want to access. And I think as we now see that shift, it's not just necessarily the information on dairy farms, but as like Harriet mentioned, there's a lot of people that are going out to rear these beef calves now and work directly with dairy farmers. They're having to learn a whole new skill set, and we need to be sure that as an industry we have the right tools for those people that are coming into the industry as maybe new entrants or new starters and looking for a way into farming. And calf rearing has become, well, it was for our own business, started off calf rearing. That's how we ended up with a farm. So, I think we need to have the tools for those people.
But that's an interesting comment as well, because I'd just say from the podcast point of view, anything that's usually to do with calf rearing is extremely popular. As it still stands, Laura Tennant is still the most popular. Sarah keeps creeping up there, and then Laura moves forward a little bit again. But it's she's still just about the most popular. But then when we've done the evidence-based calf rearing one, I think with Butalar, that's been incredibly popular. The recent ones we've done on the bit of the journey we've been on, they've proved to be incredibly popular. So it just, people want that knowledge. I've even had vets say to me, oh yeah, we recommend people listen to the one with Laura on milk powders and whatever. People want that knowledge on the young stock rearing, and undoubtedly, as you say, there is a thirst for it. But even with that, we still need to be consistent and the right message, isn't it? When you've got opposing companies giving you different information, you're going to sit there and go, well, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, and I think picking up on what Laura said and whatever term we call it, professionalizing the role of calf rearing is fundamental to that, is empowering the people that are doing it to feel that it's important. I mean, Sarah, women in dairy, the necessity of that was from women wanting knowledge. And a lot of the focus has been on calf rearing because they tend to be the people on farm that are doing it, but it's done as like Laura said, before you go out and do your day job or before kids go to school. And what my aspiration would be, having been a vet in practice, is rather than doing my weekly fertility adult cow visit and while you're here, can you look at the calves? There is a 2 weekly, monthly calf routine visit.
And that's such a role for vet techs as well, isn't it, Sarah? Yeah, I think, that's such a growing area that farmers could use their vet techs to be doing that role on farm, if perhaps they haven't got all the resources to be monitoring it themselves, to actually outsource some of those things.
Yeah, whether it's weighing, not just budding, but also weighing, and as you say, you've got to measure it to quantify it, haven't you, to know how you're progressing.
Yeah, and just keeping people on track. how are you cleaning your buckets? Just remind, we all need that, don't we? We all know what we should do, but it's only
we all know what we should do. And if we don't, there's an excellent AHDB video that features the one and only Sarah here, showing everybody how to wash a calf bucket. It's if you want a laugh, it's a good one to watch.
Yeah, but we
with
do
a good message.
We do laugh, but actually, as a team, with your vet or the specialist vet tech, sitting down and watching a video like that and having a discussion around it, and actually then adapting protocols is so powerful. We can't underestimate that power of teams working together. Measure, monitor, change. Things don't have to be set in stone, do they? They are always evolving.
I'd also say, Britt, as you say, it's a team. Bring in your nutritionist.
Yes.
With Emily, when we did the one about the hidden months sort of thing, that was the same. She was saying that, and I said, well, yeah, it'd be the same sometimes. Often, I won't see them from when they go out in the spring to when they come back in the autumn. Oh, well, we want a bulling diet for them. And okay, well, what's happened in the last 6 months or whatever it's happened to be? Where are they? What are they doing? How have they been? These things all come into it. If you want to hit those targets, if you want to be cut, I know we're talking beef more, but if we want to be hitting calving at 23 months for the beef, if we still want to be not culling them, but killing them out at whatever age it is, what your target is, these things still need to be monitored and still need to go forward with it.
Now, Sarah, I'm glad you brought that video up, because actually I was just looking at that the other day, and you're laughing, but that sort of knowledge in those videos, because people learn in different ways. You might read something in a book, or you might attend a meeting, and some people just like to watch something online. But that colostrum tubing video is our most popular video on the AHDB Dairy channel. It's had like 73,000 views or something like that. So despite the fact that these might be really old resources and videos, not saying you're old, Sarah, sorry,
thank you.
That's come out the wrong way.
So what Sarah are you referring to there?
But it is literally, they're really popular. People are still accessing these tools and resources, which shows that there's definitely a need for that sort of information. And as Sarah said, it's like managing change on farmers and teams. I think you've got to engage your team because you can come in with, and I've learned this traveling, you can come in with all the ideas in the world. If you don't get the team on board with it, it doesn't happen. So I think, teamwork's important.
Yeah. So any other comments regarding the right start, or really we're saying that the information's out there, people just need to be using it in the right way? Yeah. Okay. So the third pillar, I believe, was right route. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So what are we meaning by right route then?
So it's promoting a fair calf supply chain that support sustainable, productive businesses, right from the calf end right through to the finisher. So it does, I suppose, go beyond calf strategy.
Yeah.
We are airing into the sort of beef supply chain. No surprise, the focus is on having more TB biosecure units to support those farmers that are under TB restrictions to get those calves off.
We're referring to what you mean AFUs?
Yeah, and even exploring novel units that, so one of the asks is having grazing. So we used to have grazing AFUs when wildlife control became sort of widespread across the predominant high risk area. Obviously, we didn't want to put potentially infected cattle back out to infect the wildlife population, which we were managing that risk. So those licenses were taken back, and no new grazing AFUs have been licensed. But referring back to, we were talking about those calves from some of those spring block calving units with small stature cows. Some of those animals might rear better from a carcass quality point of view by grazing. So is there options that we can explore with that? It's a massive ask, because we do have policy that says no way, we don't have grazing AFUs, but could we explore some of those? The other thing is just supply and demand. We need more of them. So I was in a meeting a few weeks ago, and someone said to me that there were 1,000 calves needing a place in an AFU and only 500 places available. That's why generally dairy farmers will always say, I get shafted on price because it's supply and demand. So the more people we can encourage to become these biosecure rearing units by making the red tape less, not increasing risk, because they are biosecure units. And again, we've had that really successful working group that has looked at this, brought the right people into the room to have those conversations. I mean, the success of the previous strategy was because we took APHA and DEFRA staff, who were the policy writers and makers, out onto dairy farms to look at the logistics of getting calves off farm within a set window when you're under movement restrictions. And they saw the practicalities of it, and even just the paperwork. So TB is still going to be a big focus. The other thing we talked about, and we talked about this through the other two pillars, is access to data and that ability to share data. So we need that traceability system, that database where we can get that carcass information back to the genetics. But also, if I'm buying calves, what vaccines have they had? What tests have they had to prove what colostrum intake they've taken? All of that information should have a value. But we need a system to be able to share that. And I think the ambition is the livestock information system program. We want to get the cattle traceability, the cattle movement right. But the aspiration is that with permission, you can, as a farmer, share whatever information you want. But I know I'm no IT expert, and I know that's probably a massive ask.
But I know myself, like when we spoke to Butlar, and I guess we ended up talking about the immunogy and everything, like what you're saying there. As they said, I guess because they're integrated, it makes it easier so they can follow those animals through. But really, you're saying, let's make this almost a nationwide thing, whether they're in a system or not. But they were like, take the immunogy. They could see the results because you're killing out that much quicker. You're not waiting till sort of 3-year-old before they finish the first lactation, second on to see what the results are. They were killing out earlier beef cattle. You can see those results earlier. So they're able to see that those calves, for argument's sake, that had the better, using the immunogy as example, had the better colostrum, therefore had the better growth rates, killed out earlier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's that kind of data actually is really relevant, that even if you might think, well, once that calf's gone on, it doesn't matter. Well, actually, you could say in a year's time, 2 years' time, you'll have that feedback and go, well, actually, maybe if your protocol needs to change because X, Y, Z, and actually it might benefit your dairy replacements as well.
Yeah, and feeding right back into what Harriet was talking about in the right calf, I mean, all of these are totally interlinked, is that for the dairy farmer to be rewarded for making that good decision on the beef semen, whether that's from an environmental point of view, carcass quality, or feed conversion, that finisher that buys that animal for the last, 3 to 6 months of its life, all through the supply chain, there has been an uplift on value because they know the potential. But we need that feedback loop, and we need it to be really accessible, really understandable, and to be able to action on it.
I hate to say it, but do you think that's possible, given that, how do I put it, certain people, they like to hold on to, whether it's data or whatever it happens to be, that do you think it's possible that as an industry we can open it up to allow that flow of data?
So that's the aspiration of the strategy, is we're asking people to sign up to this, because we are talking about engaging with the traceability system to share health, productivity and sustainability data across the supply chain. And if people are wanting to be involved in it and sign up to it, that is an aspiration.
And I think that's why it's important that it's not an AHDB calf strategy. It's a GB calf strategy. I know it's us talking to you today, but there's been people involved across the industry.
The whole industry, yeah.
So everyone needs to kind of buy in and get involved to make it happen.
So anything else want to be added to the right route?
So our sort of third goal is around promoting British beef and dairy. Just as a whole thing, we still import quite a lot of beef. So there's still capacity for more dairy beef or beef GB beef to fulfill that category. And we talked about, again, all of this originally came out of a reputational risk. I think hopefully we've moved from risk to being able to promote. And that is part of that GB beef and dairy kind of whole message, isn't it?
Yeah, so the right route is British beef for British market to the British quality and British standards. You're getting a good quality product because we can follow it through. We know how it's been reared. We know what's happened, rather than we're not sure where it's come from. We don't know what its history is.
Yeah, and having that assurance across that supply chain as well. We did talk about in some of our working groups about whole life assurance, which I know is a bit Marmite. Some people love the idea, some people don't. But actually, through things like Red Tractor, we have been able to influence a lot of change within the dairy industry. For example, the breeding strategy to bring about wider use of dairy female sex semen to change the number of dairy bull calves we've see born. So actually, and I am naturally an optimist, and I know that I see a lot of potential to be able to instigate positive change through assurance schemes. Not the stick, but the carrot. And again, it comes back to being rewarded for that. There's also, a bigger ask of just promoting British beef through our own domestic use within retail, within I don't know what the proper term is, out of home consumption of meat and dairy.
Okay. So really, we've talked about the strategy now for the next 5 years is looking at right calf. So are you breeding it? Are you breeding and excessive dairy heifers, maybe, where you could be breeding more beef animals? And if you are breeding beef animals, are you breeding the right ones for what you're looking for? The right start, well, we've covered that multiple times before, but really it's ensuring that calf has the right start to life with colostrum, with rearing, whatever it happens to be. And then right route is how it therefore sees its life through, basically till it's on your dinner plate. And who doesn't like a nice bit of beef? I'm sure there's somebody that doesn't, but I'm sorry, I'm a big beef fan. There you go. But really, I got to be honest, I'm looking at the time now, and I'll move around the screen because I'm thinking we probably need to start wrapping this up. But Harriet, is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation we've had today?
I think there's been lots of discussion about the importance of data, and there's lots of things we have planned to mean that the data flows better. But right here, right now, if you are a farmer who has calves on your farm, please put the sire on the passport. It sounds like the most basic thing, but it just means that the data that we already have, we can make so much better use out of.
No, I think that's a simple request that everyone can do today if they're not already doing it. So no, well mentioned. Laura?
Oh, it's really tough, actually. If there's a call to action, I'm always just going to say, give as much and as good a quality colostrum as you possibly can to your calf. This is me as a beef farmer and a beef farmer. But hopefully, from today, it's come across that this isn't going to be like onerous. This isn't about, us telling farmers what to do. This is about collectively getting the entire industry together, getting us out of our silos and getting everybody to sort of line up so we're actually all on the same page strategically, and hopefully can then, empower farmers, I guess, with decision making going forward as well.
Sarah Tomlinson?
So Laura's kind of stolen what I was going to say. I don't want farmers listening to this thinking, oh, we've got to deliver on this, because farmers are under so much time pressure with everything, including TB. This is about industry coming together to ensure we put a framework, a model in place that actually makes it really easy for farmers to change things on farm, because there's a reward, whether that is financial, environmental, welfare, or whatever it is. So this isn't for farmers to deliver. This is for industry to deliver, to support farmers to get rewarded, really.
Okay. Sarah Bolt.
So I think what I'm just picking up from the whole conversation is that it's that strategy that is there to enable the success of our beef industry, that is of which our dairy industry is the foundation of so much of. And I think that it's just, as you say, just that framework to bring everybody together to try and achieve the right thing for the whole industry, so everybody in the industry benefits from it, and the consumer knows that they're getting that high welfare, high environmentally friendly product that, you know, we know that we are producing in this country.
Definitely. So yeah, no, I'd like to thank our three guests. So thank you very much for your time today, and I hope everyone's enjoyed this. You've had a good GB calf week. We're obviously been talking about the GB calf strategy for the next 5 years. If people want to know more about this information, maybe hear more about the three pillars or read more about the three pillars, is it on the AHDB website, or is there other resources available?
So you can find a link from the AHDB website, but we are linking this in with the ruminant health and welfare, other welfare strategies. So there's a dairy welfare strategy, the industry came together. There's soon to be a beef welfare strategy. There's a sheep welfare strategy. And so now this is ultimately a calf welfare strategy. So ruminant health and welfare website, we will have pages on there that goes through all of the background and those pillars and what we're trying to achieve.
No, thank you very much. So there you go. If you want to hear more, then go and look for that. But otherwise, say thank you to the three of you. And let's just remember the three pillars, which are right calf, right start, and right journey. I got it right. And I wasn't looking at
right route.
Sorry, I got it wrong. I was going to say I wasn't looking at my bit of paper. Right calf, right start, right routes. So there you go. So on that note, I'd like to say again, thank you to the three of you. But otherwise, it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me. It's great to speak to you all.
Oh, thank you for having us and keeping the three of us all under control and not talking over each other. You've done incredibly well.
Yes, thank you.
No, it wasn't quite as chaotic as I thought, so thank you very much. Thank you for listening to the Chewing the Cud podcast for the UK dairy industry, brought to you from the southwest of England and listened to around the world. Now for the really boring bit, I'm afraid, the legal disclaimer. The information provided during this podcast has been prepared for general information purposes only and does not constitute advice. The information must not be relied upon for any purpose, and no representation or warranty is given to its accuracy, completeness, or otherwise. Any reference to other organisations, businesses, or products during this podcast are not endorsements or recommendations of Chewing the Cud Limited. The views of Andrew Jones are personal and may not be the views of Chewing the Cud Limited, and the views of Sarah Bolt are personal and may not be the views of Kingshay Farming and Conservation Limited and any affiliated companies. For more information on the podcast and details of services offered by Chewing the Cud Limited, visit www.chewingthecud.com. Thank you and goodbye.